Welcome to the Craft Yarn Council's news series, Stitch Away Stress. I'm Mary Colucci, Founding Executive Director of the Council. Since April is National Stress Awareness Month, we will be interviewing many of the people who have helped to raise awareness of the wellness benefits of crochet and knitting. To begin, we felt it was only fitting that our first guest should be Betsan Corkhill, who is credited with pioneering scientific research in the therapeutic benefits of knitting. Betsan Corkhill, who lives in Bath, England, is a clinically trained physiotherapist and well-being coach who has pioneered the burgeoning field of therapeutic knitting since 2005. Betsan is the author of 2 books, Knit for Health and Wellness, How to Knit a Flexible Mind and More, and Crochet Therapy. She's also founder of Stitchlinks, a global support network for the therapeutic benefits of crafts, particularly knitting. We'll have links at the website to all of the books and resources mentioned here. Welcome, Betsan, and thanks so much for joining us today. To start, I would love to have you personally tell us how you became interested in the whole topic of therapeutic knitting.
Well, actually, I stumbled across it because I was working as a physiotherapist. And I gave up physiotherapy in 2002 because I became really frustrated at not being able to give my patients the time and the treatment I felt they needed. And a typical scenario would be a doctor ringing me up and saying, would you go and see Mrs. Smith because she can't get out of her chair, she can't climb stairs. So I'd go and visit her, but actually the reality of it was that she wasn't getting out of her chair because she had no reason to get out of her chair, no meaning to the day, and she was socially isolated. So I knew with 100% certainty she wouldn't do the exercises I left her or carry out the lifestyle changes because the system didn't support anybody like that to do that type of thing. So I ended up having a big change of career and became a freelance production editor for a range of camera and computer magazines. And that publisher also had a big craft portfolio. And at the time they were publishing Simply Knitting and a lot of the bigger cross-stitching magazines. And they were also just about to bring out the Knitter. And I ended up on the craft portfolio, to cut a long story short. And one of the jobs they used to give freelancers, because nobody else liked doing it, was to look after the letters pages. But I loved it because it really did entail reading all the letters that came into the office, and they got sacksfuls of letters every day. And they'd also just run a competition on why people found their craft beneficial or therapeutic. So there were literally thousands of letters, which were really quite profound life stories. And I can vividly remember the first letter I picked up was from a 14-year-old girl who said, who was in and out of hospital all the time. And she said, I don't have to take my pain medication when I'm knitting. And then the second letter I picked up was from a lady who tried to commit suicide. And her husband had taken a knitting kit into hospital for her out of desperation. And she said, now I look forward to every project, and now I look forward to tomorrow. So those were the first 2 letters I read, and there were sacksfuls of letters like that. And the most striking thing was that there were large numbers of people from different backgrounds and cultures saying exactly the same thing. So I had my sort of physio head on and thought, actually, my first thought was this could be something that we could use to help the people that I used to see on my community rounds to be successful from an armchair, to get an interest in the world again, maybe a springboard to other activities. And then I became really intrigued as to what was happening, what was the mechanisms behind it, why were so many people saying the same thing, what was the science behind it. So I set about trying to find out what the science was behind it. And as the years have gone on, I've realized that it's a lot more, it's a much wider thing. It's a lot more benefits than simply occupying people. Although occupying people is really, really important. You can use it for a lot more things, so it's much wider.
At what point did you decide to start this online community, this that you call Stitchlinks?
I decided to start Stitchlinks really right at the very beginning of it in 2005, because I quickly realized that people would need, this was so important, that people would need a trusted source of information that they could go to, because we would be dealing with people who are potentially really vulnerable, and that I could see media headlines that would sensationalize issues. So, for example, when we published our paper that showed that people felt happier, the more frequently people knit, the happier and calmer they feel, and fewer than 1% of people remain sad, and that translated across to people with clinical depression. One of the big tabloid newspapers in the UK had a headline saying knitting cures depression. So I'm very, I was very aware that that kind of thing would happen. As I wanted people to always have somewhere where they could go, where they could trust all the information that was on there.
Oh, absolutely. And today, Stitchlinks has so many followers from around the world.
Yes, the newsletter goes out to about 72 different countries every month.
That's incredible.
So,
That's really
yes, I get emails from everywhere, which is fantastic.
right. Well, you've often said that the K word is the biggest barrier to your work. And you came up with some really unique phrasing that helped you negotiate your dealings with healthcare professionals. Could you share how your experiences with the K word?
Yes. When I found that when people asked what I was doing, if I said, for example, where we are using therapeutic knitting to help people with long-term pain, often doctors and scientists and researchers would, well, laugh, to be frank. But I found that if I said, well, we're using a bilateral rhythmic psychosocial intervention to help people with long-term health problems, they would say, that's very interesting, and how are you doing that then? And I could say, well, we're using knitting. So that got a foot in the door, and that changed their perspective on it. I think lots of people have got their preconceptions about the word knitting, and they associate it with certain types of people. And actually, there's a lot behind the activity that's beneficial.
It's amazing. Yes. Hopefully that's changing slowly but surely. And in part because you did some groundbreaking online research with Cardiff University in 2010. And the information that resulted from that survey was really quite astonishing and helped open a lot of doors. Could you share a little bit of the findings from
Yes, we did a survey and we got over 3,500 valid responses to 50 questions, which is phenomenal in terms of that type of survey. To put it into perspective, a psychologist friend of mine was put a survey online at the same time and got 12 responses. So for us to get 3,500 responses, that alone got the interest of researchers and academics. And our most significant finding was that the more frequently people knit, so more than 3 times a week, the happier and calmer they feel. So 81% of respondents felt happier, 54% of those felt either happy or very happy, and excitingly, fewer than 1% remained sad. And because we had so many people respond, because we'd asked if they had a medical condition, we were able to look at the number of people who had clinical depression, and there were well over 300 people with clinical depression in that group. So very excitingly, those findings translated across to people with clinical depression. So fewer than 1% of people with clinical depression remained sad after knitting.
That's amazing. Well, I know that your research had a big influence on the Craft Yarn Council's research a couple of years later, and you were very supportive of our effort and we found very similar results. Of course, it was very different than your research, but the bottom line was that people expressed very similar positive impact of this knitting. And that's very important.
Absolutely. And, the research into loneliness now is showing that loneliness is highly detrimental to well-being. And when you go to a knitting group, you get a form of social contact that you don't get anywhere else, because you get a very rich, diverse form of social contact from people with all different backgrounds, all different cultures. Because normally when we socialize, we tend to socialize with people of the same social background as us, the same viewpoints as us. So it's quite difficult to meet people with different viewpoints, from different backgrounds, different cultures, in a safe environment. A knitting group provides that really rich, diverse form of social contact, and that's really, really important.
And it always amazes me how there's something about the process that in this group setting that makes it easier for people to talk about things that they might have had hesitation to talk to others about. It does seem to break down barriers in an amazing way. It's very positive.
Absolutely. And my theory behind that is that it's the automatic nature of the movement that does that. Because what you're doing is you're occupying the brain with this background automatic task. So that this comes across in the stories as well, that people say it frees up the rest of their mind, and it somehow limits or stops your self-criticism going on. So people find it much easier to talk. So I've used it with patients, for example, who have been through a lot of trauma, who will not talk about that trauma. And you find that if you sit quietly with them and knit with them side by side, then they're soon talking about things that they've never told anybody else. I mean, only last week I was knitting with two young men who started talking about male suicide. And these two men would never have spoken about that kind of thing beforehand.
And I notice that even with young children, when we've done programs with teachers and you go into schools and you have, the kids coming together, and the dynamic is so rich, and how they talk to one another, how they help one another. It's very rewarding to see that positive interaction.
Yes, and I think knitting's been used with lots of different communities in that way. People who find it difficult to talk. It's been used with addicts. It's been used with people who've been traumatized, with gang members, with prisoners, where people need to talk. And I think lots of in that sort of group of people as well, they have tended to live with a lot of criticism in their lives. So all of a sudden they're with a group of people who are praising what they've made, who are saying, did you make that? That looks really nice. So that raises self-esteem as well. So it raises confidence and self-esteem.
Right. Well, you do a tremendous amount of coaching, groups in pain management. And pain is just one of the many triggers of stress. And, others can include money problems and just balancing work and family situations. And based on your experiences, what tips could you offer our listeners who might be dealing with these kind of everyday challenges?
Yeah, the nature of stress has changed. It evolved to protect us, to enable us to fight or fly away from danger that was life-threatening. But as you've pointed out, the modern day stress is different from that. It can come from multiple stressors at any one time. And it can build up insidiously in the background without our realizing it, to a point where we become so stressed and busy that we've forgotten what it feels like to be relaxed. And it's really, really important for well-being to switch off on a daily basis. And we're actually seeing a lot of young people now with health problems, mainly because they don't switch off. They have activities from the moment they wake up to 9, 10 o'clock at night. They're then on social media. They sleep with their phones under their pillows, so they don't switch off. And you can't run on high all the time without something giving in. So that's really detrimental to health. So I would use knitting to enable you to switch off on a daily basis. Even if you only have time to do it for 10 minutes, it's worthwhile, because when you bring down your stress levels, you automatically tune up your body's natural healing systems. And stress switches on all the systems that will help you to either run away or to fight. So it makes your muscles tense in preparation for that. It makes your heart beat faster, your blood pressure goes up, you store energy, so you put on weight, all in preparation for a threatening world. So stress also switches off activities that are not immediately needed for survival. So it switches off sleep. Your brain won't allow you to sleep if it feels you're in danger. It switches off the ability to reproduce, which is why, lots of people trying for a baby are quite often successful when they finally relax and give, and stop trying. It switches off healing, and it also switches off higher learning as well. And affects your immune system. Your stress on your immune system and your pain system are very closely linked. So that's why when you're highly stressed, you get a cold, because it affects the way the efficiency of your immune system. So recent research is also showing that stress increases inflammation in your body, and inflammation is thought to be at the core of many, if not most, of our health problems.
Words of wisdom. Recently, you co-founded the Institute of Therapeutic, Craft and Creativity with Callie Lash, who's a noted producer, director, and principal of Lash Media. The initial offering at ITCC is a video series based on your workshops, and it's called Can You Knit a Healthy Brain? What's covered in the series?
There are a number of issues covered. We look at the science behind knitting. We look at therapeutic knitting, the project choice, and how different choices of project can put you into different meditative-like states. But also in that, we look at the biology of stress, and that, because it's really important to understand how all these things affect your biology. Because then when you know how it affects your biology, you are more likely to benefit from approaches to reduce them, because you know why, you know what's happening to your own body. We also look at the biology of pain and using therapeutic knitting from the biological perspective of pain. So there are 20 videos in all covering that range of topics.
And when people complete the series, do most go on to share that information with others, or?
People who go on my workshops and do these videos talk about it within their knitting groups and share the information. They also very interestingly go and talk to their doctors about it. So more and more doctors and family, friends, more and more, the word is getting out there that it is beneficial, and that there is a biological basis to it about why it works.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I know there will be more and more information available at ITCC, and we will have links to not only that website, but also to Stitchlinks and information about your books. So we're just so appreciative of your taking the time to share some of your insights. And we hope that people will visit Stitchlinks and ITCC and learn even more about the work that you're doing.
Thanks, Mary. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you, Betsan.